What's a fact, but nobody understands it correctly? Viewer edition.
Story 1. The Monty Hall problem sounds complicated, but it's not that complicated. There's 3 doors. 2 have a goat, and 1 has a car behind it. You want the car. Host asks you to pick a door. Then they open another door that has a goat behind it to reveal a goat. So there's 2 doors left. Your door and the other door which isn't opened. 1 door has a car behind it. The host asks if you would like to switch doors. The question is, does switching doors have any difference, or is it just 50-50? The answer is if you should switch doors, you'll have a 2 out of 3 chance of getting the car. It seems wrong. It doesn't make sense at first, but the explanation is below. When you first pick a door, you have a 2 out of 3 chance of picking a goat, so you've probably not got the car. Then the doors are reduced to 2, 1 which has a car and 1 which does not. Now, we've established that there's a 2 out of 3 chance you didn't pick the car, which means there's actually a 2 out of 3 chance that the other door you didn't pick has the car behind it, and so switching doors gives you a 2 out of 3 chance of getting the car. I can play it out below if that still doesn't make sense. So there's 3 doors called A, B, and C. Let's say door C has the car behind it. So you pick door A. The host reveals a goat behind door B. If you switch to door C, you win the car. If you pick door B, the host reveals the goat behind door A. If you switch to door C, you win the car. If you pick door C, the host reveals a goat behind either door A or door B. If you switch, you don't win the car. So 2 out of 3 times you won the car by switching. Not switching only gives you a 1 out of 3 chance of winning the car. I'm not gonna lie, I wasn't convinced at the start of the explanation because I've heard this problem before and I'm like, I guess it makes sense in math, but it doesn't make sense logically, but I don't know, for some reason that explanation kind of convinced me. I'm still not 100% sold. I still think that you mathematicians need to just chill out. Hey folks, did you not get the Monty Hall problem? Well, guess what? Story 2! For those who don't know, the Monty Hall problem goes like this. You're on a game show and are presented with 3 doors. 1 of those doors has a brand new car behind it, while the other 2 have joke prizes. For example, goats! You're told to pick the door you think has the car behind it. After you pick one, however, the host reveals 1 of the remaining doors that has a goat behind it, and then asks you if you want to switch. The question is whether or not you should keep your original choice or switch. The correct answer is always better to switch at that point. I could get into the probability and math about why this is the case, but unfortunately that ends up confusing more people. A guy I know at work came up with a much better story to explain it. Imagine God tells you, I'm thinking of a particular atom out of the 10 to the 78th power atoms in the observable universe. Try to pick the one I'm thinking of and I'll give you $1 billion. So you pick one. Immediately, God brushes away all the other atoms in the universe beside the one you picked and 1 single other atom. And he says 1 of the 2 is the atom he had in mind and asks you if you'd like to switch. Obviously, you definitely switch in that case because the odds are overwhelmingly, astronomically in favor of that atom being the one God had in mind. The same deal with Monty Hall, just with far lesser probability, but still greater than if you kept your original choice. If I just say that I get it, will people leave me alone in the comments? Please? No, I understand the concept behind it. And actually that story that your friend made up takes it to such a wild scale that, yeah, you know what? I understand it now. That makes sense. I'm still iffy about the whole Monty Hall problem with the actual goats in a car, but you know what? Either way, the worst thing I'm walking out of there with is a goat, and you know, that's pretty cool.
Story 3. I've actually got 2. 1, 20% chance of rain. Most people assume that when a weather forecaster says 20% chance of rain, that means that the day in question only has a 1 in 5 chance that there will be rain that day. But weather forecasts using some sort of bizarre counterintuitive moon logic aren't actually saying that. 20% chance of rain means that 20% of the area they're talking about at that time is definitely going to get rain. 2. The tomato is a fruit. True, botanically speaking, it is classified as a fruit because the botanical usage of the word fruit is just shorthand for fruiting body, which is to say the part of the plant that makes the seeds, spores, whatever, that will potentially grow into a new generation. However, the term vegetable has absolutely no scientific usage. It is a completely culinary agricultural term. Fruit means something completely different in terms of farming and cooking, and the tomato definitely doesn't meet the standards. It is a vegetable. So anyone who says that a tomato is X not Y or uses an actually to imply that it's not the other thing is objectively wrong. Anyone who says it's one but doesn't bother to mention the other is half correct. The only fully correct answer is the tomato is a fruit and a vegetable.
People always like to talk about, oh, tomato's actually a fruit or a vegetable or whatever. And yeah, I'm glad that this person got to the point that vegetable is more an agricultural culinary term. It's not scientific. But also, so many things are fruit. Cucumbers are fruit. Zucchini's fruit. Corn is a fruit. So many things that you call vegetables are fruiting bodies and therefore are technically fruit, just like a tomato. So all you little folks who like to be like, actually a tomato is a... Shut up.
Story 4. I forget the source, but I remember reading somewhere that the reason for the 10% of our brains myth was from a news article where an interviewed scientist said something to the effect of, "At present, we only understand what about 10% of the brain actually does," which got misinterpreted over time by the article itself and by the general public via telegraph effect to mean there was 90% of the brain we as individuals didn't know how to use, rather than that we used all of it, but scientists hadn't yet nailed down what all of the different parts actually did yet. Story 5. Concerning story 28 from the original video, I've heard it explained as you don't use all of your brain at once any more than you have all of your house lights on at once. If they are all on at once, you're having a seizure. Even with the neurologist's clarification, this metaphor still makes a bit of sense given that most appliances still take some trickle charge when turned off. Concerning story 40 from the original video, there was a very recent, as in literally this past month, study that confirmed that cold temperatures kill off the immune cells in our nose, explaining why people are more likely to get sick in winter. It's not that the cold directly causes colds, but it makes cold germs more likely to get past your first line of defenses and actually infect you. Lack of vitamin D due to reduced sun exposure, vitamin D is a major player in the immune system, could also factor into this. So cold weather doesn't directly make you sick, but it does make getting sick more likely. Story 6. Concerning story 34 from the original video, for people who didn't spend their childhood watching syndicated reruns of old TV shows, most of this story refers to the original game show Let's Make a Deal from 1963, which was co-created and hosted by Monty Hall. The show is still around, but the most popular version was in the 60s and 70s. On the show, audience members would wear costumes and bring gimmicks to try to get attention. In addition to the games and prizes, the show featured music and comedy bits. It was basically a variety show with audience members providing the entertainment. Concerning story 36, also, so many women died during childbirth, 20 to 30%, that the average male lifespan was significantly longer than female. Story 7. As far as I understand, it's more complicated for the last one. You may experience symptoms of the common cold for lots of reasons. It's not always viruses. And minor hypothermia also may be in charge. It's usually short-term in this case, though. Also, it arguably may slightly decrease your immune response, which may be enough to catch a virus if you have already encountered it. Other sources say you're less likely to get common cold if your immune system is weaker, though. But hypothermia isn't going to give you rhinovirus or whatever else upper respiratory tract infection.
Yeah, I feel like even when I was a kid, it was pretty well known that the whole oh, if you go outside when it's cold, then you're going to get a cold, No, we knew even back then, all those decades ago, that that was not true. And it's just, yeah, it makes you weaker. And also I think they say like when people are cold, they tend to like huddle together a little bit more, so you're in closer contact. There are so many things where it being cold can lead to greater chances of getting sick, but it's not a direct connection.
Story 8. The scenario of the Lucy movie was a terrible through and through. Example, towards the end, she can snap her fingers and make a room full of people pass out. Despite this, for tension building, the scenarist went for, "Group of good guys, please sacrifice yourself to hold the incoming enemies off while I go do something." In the time she asked, she could have taken care of the threat herself. Story 9. Point from a butcher, the red fluid is blood from within the meat, and rarely does the blood clot by this point. Most steak cuts are stored from the packing center in what we call wet aging bags, which is effectively just a big vacuum seal bag made to keep it from drying out. This means that the blood doesn't have exposure to oxygen to dry out or clot in full, as most of the blood is leaked into the cavity of the bag. The red fluid is in fact blood, but it's mixed with cell fluids from the cooking process and is generally safe for consumption. I also want to mention for argument's sake that I hold a current food safety and food handling license upheld by a USDA certified agency in my state. Story 10. Seattle is very rainy. I moved down south, and anytime I say I'm from Seattle, the number one response is, "I couldn't handle all that rain." Washington has many biomes, and Seattle is the area of the temperate rainforest that stretches across the west coast. People complain that it rains in a rainforest. Also, the south thunderstorms are way more common. In Seattle, it may rain often, but it's a light sprinkle for an hour or so, then it's over, and doesn't last all day or hours like in the south. I also find it funny that half the time I visit family in the summer, Washington is having a drought.
As someone who's never been to Seattle, I have often heard about just how rainy Seattle is and all that, but yeah, this makes a lot more sense to me. I think no matter where you're from, when you travel somewhere else, you always like to over-exaggerate what your state is like. I'm in Minnesota. When I've been other places, it's always about how cold Minnesota is. It's so cold. And yeah, in the wintertime, it does get very cold. It is also very warm a lot of the other time. It's a pretty temperate place a lot of the year. In fact, it's fairly warm recently due to climate change. So, maybe we're all going to have to kind of adjust our little state stereotypes about weather.
Story 11. Concerning story 26 from the original video, that's partially correct. It's not really about vocal cords. It's more like, that sounded better in my head. You are internalizing your issues, but when you vent them, your internal thoughts compare them both as if someone else was telling you and made you think, how can I help that person about your own issues? You don't have to speak out loud, you can type it too and read it back to yourself. Concerning story 37, also, dank is something that's overused to the point that where would be annoying, but it's so broad and accessible there's more people enjoying it. That drowns out the people disliking a dank meme is a dank meme. Story 12. I've got one on the conservation of mass. I frequently hear people say that all the water that is here on planet Earth has been here since the dinosaurs were drinking it because water can't be created or destroyed. While it is likely that a good amount of it has been here the whole time, every organism that participates in cellular respiration, so nearly all of them, is constantly making more water out of the oxygen in the air. Conversely, plants strip the hydrogen from water to make carbohydrates. If water could not be created or destroyed, life would not exist. Story 13. Concerning story 28 from the original video, there are a lot of stories about the 10% and how it is misinformation. The one that I like is the one told by my professor in uni. You are not only using 10% of your brain, you're using 100% of your brain, but the scientists and researchers know only 10% of the brain's functions, i.e. some parts are for controlling body parts, some are for memories, some are for hormone secretions, other parts we know it's doing something because we can see it lighting up during the test, but why it is lighting up we currently don't know. We need more information and research and testing different stimuli to get a sense of what its function is. Story 14. The McDonald's coffee may have been overly hot, but I've heard that the woman who sued was driving with the cup of coffee between her legs rather than in a cup holder. Seems to me that if you're in a moving car with a cup of hot liquid between your legs, there's a good chance you're going to get burned.
Whether or not the woman was holding the coffee between her legs isn't the problem. The problem is that, okay, yes, she had it between her legs and she shouldn't have. And, so maybe she did something wrong and it spilled and burnt her legs. It should have caused the kind of burns you or I would get from coffee, like first degree maybe, or something like that. What she got were burns that required surgery, like extreme burns. So whether or not she was a bit clumsy, she was a bit clumsy with something that was significantly hotter than it was supposed to be. So not a good argument. Sorry.
Story 15. I believe the person who invented the idea of only using 10% of your brain meant that you only reach 10% of your brain's potential if you were constantly learning and didn't spend time doing things that didn't make you smarter, as he tried this with his son, who possibly gained the highest IQ in the world, but he never got an IQ test for some reason.
Even in this video about facts that people get wrong, we've had multiple people bringing up the whole 10% brain thing and slight variations between them, this one being pretty drastically different. I'm not going to claim that I know the exact story behind it and the, 100% fact and truth, but someone here is wrong. So I think it just kind of proves the point about how easy it is to get some of this stuff wrong.
Story 16. The phrase sour grapes being about jealousy. Sour grapes is actually about rationalizing. In Aesop's fable, The Fox and the Grapes, the fox wants to eat some grapes that are high up on a bush. He tries jumping and several other tactics, stands on the back of another passing animal. Eventually, no matter what, he just can't reach them and basically rationalizes that they were probably sour anyway. Story 17. The Titanic's sinking wasn't just the iceberg. The other factors. I have been made aware that some of these factors are wrong and want to thank them for correcting me. 1. No binoculars. No key to unlock it. 2. No waves. 3. New moon, which means no light. 4. A fire weakened a part of the keel. 5. The communication system was out for 20 minutes. 6. The captain, like many others, believed the ship was unsinkable, so he fails to do a lifeboat drill. Story 18. Richard Dawkins coined the word meme in 1978 in his book The Selfish Gene. He wanted a word that describes ideas replicating through a culture like genes replicating through a population of a species, and wanted a word that sounded a bit like gene, so he went with meme or mental gene. Story 19. I knew a guy who had his master's in physics. I sheepishly said I'd taken a year of physics in college and gotten good grades, but still felt like I didn't understand it. He laughed and said, I got my master's in it, and all that taught me was that you need a doctorate to understand physics. Story 20. The Mozart effect. Listening to Mozart and other classical music does not increase your IQ. While it can improve some cognitive function, the effect is only temporary and won't increase your intelligence over time. You can actually get similar effects just by listening to music you really enjoy. This is why I jam out to Childish Gambino while working.
All this stuff about IQ, too. Folks, who gives a crap about IQ? It is a measure of a fairly narrow band of knowledge, and it can give you some ideas about a person, but it's people overthink just how important it really is. And listening to Mozart will increase your IQ, and no, there's so many kinds of intelligence and stuff like that. But yeah, music helps you think. If it helps you relax, helps get you in the zone, listen to some music. More of a Bach man myself.
Story 21. Heyo, a person with a former milk allergy. Yes, it is in fact possible to not be lactose intolerant and still be allergic to milk. I was. Also, something that some people also don't realize is that just because you're born with an allergy doesn't mean it's lifelong. Allergies come and go. It's just a roll of the dice. Story 22. I think the Hakuna Matata thing is how even good philosophies can turn bad if used in the wrong way. It was great for Timon and Pumbaa, who have minimal responsibilities and no past trauma. For Simba, who used it as a coping mechanism to be in denial about what is wrong, it was bad. Different people need different forms of self-care. Story 23. Slavery happens in the UK too, usually around the larger cities. Manchester has quite a lot, apparently. Part of my job is to recognize the signs of someone who is enslaved or being trafficked. It is very, very depressing. Not to mention, the number of homeless people is on the rise, as is mental health issues involving either consideration or attempt of self-termination. Story 24. Washington's teeth were actually made from hippopotamus ivory. The very stiff spring mechanism connecting the top and bottom set required a lot of effort to keep closed, which is why old George had such an odd expression on his face in his official portrait.
I have heard so many stories about what Washington's teeth were actually made of, and I don't believe any of you anymore. You know what I think his teeth were made out of? Teeth. And that's actually a thing that many dentures were made of. Go look it up. It's pretty interesting.
Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.